Legend has it that this cave-like opening below Main Street was once a colonial-era escape route. It sure is romantic to believe that the Moravians dug a long tunnel leading from the Sun Inn to Old York and Ohio Road, allowing revolutionary big shots to get away quick in the event of the arrival of the British or maybe hostile Native Americans. But more likely, this now blocked-up opening was probably the product storage cellar for the old Widman Brewery, which was located right here. Makes sense, since in those years before electric refrigeration, a cave was perfect for maintaining a consistent 35 to 40 degree temperature for the successful storage of barrels. There were 3 thriving breweries within about 500 yards of where we are right now. So this leads to an interesting question. Just how big was brewing here in Bethlehem?
The Moravians began by importing beer from Philadelphia and New York. But in 1747 they established a colony we know now as Christian Springs about 12 miles upstream on the Monocacy Creek, where they built a brewery, malt house and distillery. In 1755 production was just under 200 barrels of beer and 20 barrels of whiskey. Bethlehem's Crown Inn, later named the Sun Inn, served these products. After the Revolutionary War, the region was flooded with an abundant supply of cheap whiskey and spirits. The Moravian Church's ruling body saw beer as a way to stave off the effects of demon run, and in 1781, authorized the construction of a brewery. They brought in the brewmaster from Christian Springs, who dispensed the first frothy product of the vat to the waiting public in January 1783. Meanwhile, the situation at Christian Springs was deteriorating. Although its products had gained a wide reputation, the young men running the brewery and distillery had difficulty keeping up with demand. The church ruled that there was too much drinking on the job and closed it down in 1796. Sebastian Gaunt learned the brewing trade in Europe and emigrated to a Moravian community in North Carolina in the 1790s. He intended to start a brewery, but the area proved unsatisfactory. He moved to Bethlehem, where he became known as John Sebastian Goundy, and in 1803 he became brewmaster. In 1811, due to pollution from the Moravian tannery, he persuaded them to build another brewery on the bank of the Monocacy Creek near the dam of the mill race near his house. He conducted the brewery there until 1819. It became known as the Monocacy Brewery and continued as such until around 1850, when it was run as a distillery. There are no records of other breweries in Bethlehem until mid-century, when, as the story goes, a Prussian artist named Gustav Grunwald convinced a saloon owner to start a brewery in the field next to his house so he and his friends wouldn't have to walk so far to get a beer. John Schilling left the bar business, erected a brewery, and brewed the city's first lager beer. In those days, brewing was limited to the colder months and beer was lagered in vaults refrigerated with ice. Schilling's initial output was 1,500 barrels of beer, which was more than enough to supply Grunwald and his friends, who spent their summer evenings under a grape arbor next to the brewery. Word of Schilling's lager quickly spread to the rest of the community. In 1870, Matthias Uhl purchased the brewery and John Schilling opened another saloon. The brewery was improved and enlarged to 20,000 barrel capacity. Uhl's celebrated lager beer, porter, bock beer and Vienna export beer were met with acclaim throughout the Lehigh Valley. An early advertisement described Uhl's beer as a tonic that will build and tone up the blood so that persons afflicted may go through the long hard winter without any ill effect. Uhl's Old Brewery Saloon is now called the Old Brewery Tavern. Jacob Widman, a former partner in Lieberman's Eagle Brewery in Allentown, purchased a defunct Bethlehem brewery in 1888. In 1892 he added 600 barrels worth of storage space and, by the turn of the century, Widman had a capacity of 25,000 barrels. In 1907 a bottling house was added to package Widman's Extra Bohemian Lager Beer and Bohemian Beer and Porter. The Moravians sold off their land south of the Lehigh River in the 1840s and the area became known as South Bethlehem. The 1850s saw the discovery of zinc, the completion of the Lehigh Valley Railroad and the arrival of many immigrants. One of these was George Rennig, who emigrated with his parents and siblings from Bavaria in 1859. In the early 1860s, he purchased a property on Lehigh Mountain containing a spring-fed creek and built South Bethlehem's first brewery, complete with a hotel and several barns. The hotel became a favorite resort with a drink hall and beer garden and produced 900 barrels in 1878. Construction for the South Bethlehem Brewing Company started in October 1900 and the brewery opened in the spring of the following year, making it the first modern brewery on the south side of the Lehigh River. The property at 4th and Elm Streets was an ideal location for a brewery with access to the Reading Railroad and pure groundwater in a limestone formation just 54 feet below the surface, flowing at 100 gallons per minute. The timing was right as well, since the Bethlehem Steel Corporation was expanding to make I-beams for the nation's skyscrapers, the production of which would generate as much thirst as steel. The company erected a new bottling house in 1907, followed by a 40-ton refrigeration unit 2 years later. In 1909, they added a new 10,000-barrel cellar, increasing capacity to 40,000 barrels. 2 years later, a new brew house was built, expanding capacity to 100,000 barrels per year. Their brands included Heirloom Gold Medal Beer and Supreme Light and Dark Beer, Ale, Cream Ale and Porter. South Bethlehem advertised that it brewed the beer that makes Milwaukee jealous.
So Bethlehem's origin as a German community certainly contributed to its beer brewing reputation. Even during Prohibition, Bethlehem citizens drank their beer. I'd be the last guy to tell these fellows they weren't allowed to have a beer. I'm happy to report that after a long absence, small local breweries are back in Bethlehem and in the Lehigh Valley.